weapon with which to destroy the Covenant. Halo, The Fall of Reach by Eric Nyland. Part 11. Chapter 28. 0400 hours, August 30, 2552, military calendar. UNSC Pillar of Autumn, in orbit around Epsilon Eridani system. Reach military complex. Cortana never rested. Although based approximately on a human mind, AIs had no need to sleep or dream. Dr. Halsey had thought she could keep Cortana occupied by checking the systems of the Pillar of Autumn while she attended to her other secret projects. Her assumption was incorrect. While Cortana was intrigued with the unique design and workings of the ship, its preparation barely occupied a fraction of her processing power. She watched with the Pillar of Autumn's camera as Captain Keyes approached the ship in a shuttle pod. Lieutenant Hikawa left to greet him in the docking bay. From sea deck, Captain Keyes spoke over the intercom. "Cortana, can we have power to move the ship? I'd like to get underway." She calculated the remaining reactor burn-in time and made an adjustment to run it hotter. "The engine's final shakedown is in theta cycle," Cortana replied, operating well within normal parameters, diverting 30% power to engines. "Aye, sir." "And the other system status?" Captain Keyes asked. "Weapon system check initiated. Navigational nodes functioning. Continuing system-wide shakedown and triple checks, Captain." "Very good," he said. "Apprise me if there are any anomalies." "Aye, Captain," she replied. The comm channel snapped off. She continued her checks on the Pillar of Autumn as ordered. There were, however, more important things to consider, namely, a little reconnaissance into ONI databases, and a little revenge. She dedicated the balance of her runtime toward probing the SATCOM system around Reach for entry points. There, a ping in the satellite network coordination signal. She broadcast a resonant carrier wave at that signal and piggybacked into the system. First things first, she had 2 loose ends to take care of. While she and the Master Chief had been on the obstacle course, she had commandeered SATCOM Observation Beacon 419 and rotated it to view them from orbit. She re-entered the back door she had left open in the system and rewrote the satellite's guidance thruster subroutine. If the system was analyzed later, it would be determined that this error had altered it to a random orientation rather than a planned position. She withdrew, but left her back door intact. This trick might come in handy again. The other loose end that required her attention was Colonel Ackerson, the man who had tried to erase her and the Master Chief. Cortana reread Dr. Halsey's recommended test specifications for the Mjolnir system on the obstacle course. She had suggested live rounds, yes, but never a squad of orbital drop shock troopers, chain guns, lotus mines, and certainly not an airstrike. That was the Colonel's doing. He was an equation that needed to be balanced, what Dr. Halsey might have called payback. She linked to the UNSC personnel and planning database on Reach. The ONI AI there, Beowulf, knew her and knew not to let her in. Beowulf was thorough, methodical, and paranoid. In her own way, Cortana couldn't help but like him. But compared with her code-cracking skills, he might as well have been an accounting program. Cortana sent a rapid series of queries into the network node that processed housing transfer requests. A normally quiet node, she overloaded it with 1 billion different pings per minute. The network attempted to recover and reconfigure, causing all nodes to lag, including Node 17, personnel records.
I think it's you behind it.
She stepped in and inserted a spike wedge, a subroutine that looked like a normal incoming signal, but bounced any handshake protocol. She slipped in. The Colonel's CSV was impressive. He had survived 3 battles with the Covenant. Early in the war, he received a promotion and volunteered for a dozen Black Ops. For the last few years, however, his efforts had focused on political maneuvers rather than battlefield tactics. He had filed several requests for increased funding for his special warfare projects. No wonder he wanted the Master Chief gone. The Spartan IIs and Mjolnir were his direct competition. Worse, they were succeeding where he failed. At best, Ackerson's actions were treason. But Cortana wasn't about to reveal all this to the Oni Oversight Committee. Despite the Colonel's methods, the UNSC still needed him and his spec war specialists in the war. Justice, however, would still be meted out. From the Oni databases, she masqueraded as a routine credit check and entered the Colonel's bank account, to which she wired a substantial amount to a brothel on Gilgamesh. She made sure the bank queries sent to confirm the transaction were copied to his phone immediately. Colonel Ackerson was a married man, and his wife should be there to receive them. She cut into his personal email and sent a carefully crafted message requesting reassignment to a forward area to personnel. Finally, she inserted a ghost ring, an electronic footprint that identified the source of the alterations. Ackerson's personal computer pad. By the time Ackerson was done untangling all of that, he'd be reassigned to field duty and get back to fighting the Covenant where he belonged. With all loose ends neatly tied up, Cortana rechecked the Pillar of Autumn's reactor. The shakedown was proceeding nicely. She tweaked the magnetic field strength, and part of her watched the output from the engine's fluctuations. She inspected all weapon systems 3 times, and then went back to her own personal research. She considered how well the Master Chief had performed this morning on the obstacle course. He was more than Cortana could have hoped for. The Master Chief was much more than Dr. Halsey, or the press releases, had indicated. He was intelligent, not fearless, but as close to it as any human she had encountered. His reaction time under stress was 1/6 standard human norm. More than that, however, Cortana had sensed that he had a certain, she searched her lexicon for the proper word, nobility. He placed his mission and his duty and honor above his personal safety. She re-examined his career service vitae. He had fought in 207 ground engagements against the Covenant and been awarded every major service medal except the Prisoner of War medallion. There were holes in his CSV though. The standard blackout section, courtesy of Oni, of course. But, most curious, all data before he entered active duty had been expunged. Cortana wasn't about to let a mere erasure stop her. She traced where the order to erase that data had originated.
Hey, that's not fucking nice.
Section 3, Dr. Halsey's group. Curious. She followed the order pathway, crashed into layers of countercode. The code started a trace on her signal. She blocked it, and it restarted a trace of the origin of her block. This was a very well-crafted piece of counter-intrusion software, far superior to the normal Oni slug code. Anything else, Cortana liked the challenge. She withdrew from the database and looked for an unguarded way into Oni Section 3 cameras. Cortana listened to the hum of coded traffic along the surface of Oni's secure network. There was an unusual amount of packets today, queries and encrypted messages from Oni operatives. She peered into them and unraveled their secrets as they passed her. There were orders for ship movements and operatives outbound from Reach. This must be the new directive to send scouts into the periphery systems and find the Covenant.
Just one more, you guys.
She saw several ships docked in Reach's space docks. Oni stealth jobs made to look like private yachts. They had cute, innocuous names. The Applebee, Circumference, and the Lark. She spotted something she could use. Dr. Halsey had just entered her laboratory. She was at checkpoint 3. The doctor waited as her voice and retina patterns were being scanned. Cortana intercepted and killed the signal. The verification system reset. "Please rescan retina, Dr. Halsey," the system requested. and repeat today's code phrase in a normal voice. Before Dr. Halsey could do this, Cortana sent her own files of Dr. Halsey's retina and voice scans. She had long ago copied them, and occasionally they came in handy. Section 3 verification opened for Cortana. She had only a second before the doctor spoke and overrode the previous entry access. Cortana, however, was a lightning strike in the system. She entered, searched, and found what she wanted. Every piece of data on Spartan 117 was copied to her personnel directory within 70 milliseconds. She withdrew from the ONI database, routing all traces of her queries back to her Ackerson Ghost. She closed all connections and returned to the Pillar of Autumn. One quick check of the reactor, yes, operating within normal parameters, and she sent a complete report to Lieutenant Hall on the bridge. Cortana examined the Master Chief's complete CSV. She scanned backward through time, his performance data on the obstacle course, and the debriefing he had given at ONI headquarters. She paused and pondered the signal the Covenant had sent from Sigma Octanus 4. Intrigued, she tried to translate the sequence. The symbols looked tantalizingly familiar. Every algorithm and variation of the standard translation software she attempted, however, failed. Puzzled, she set it aside to examine later. She continued, absorbing the data from the Master Chief's files. She learned of the augmentations he and the other Spartans were made to endure, the brutal indoctrination and training they had received, and how he had been abducted at the age of 6, and a flash clone used to replace him in an ONI Black Op. All of it had been authorized by Dr. Halsey. Cortana paused for a full 3 processor cycles, churning this new data through her ethics subroutines, not comprehending. How could Dr. Halsey, who was so concerned for her Spartans, have done this to them? Of course, because it was necessary. There was no other way to preserve the UNSC against rebellion. Was Dr. Halsey a monster? Or just doing what had to be done to protect humanity? Perhaps a little of both. Cortana erased her stolen files. No matter. Whatever the Master Chief had been through in the past, it was done. He was in Cortana's care now. She would do everything in her power, short of compromising their mission, to make sure nothing ever happened to him again. Chapter 29. 0400 hours, August 30, 2552, military calendar. UNSC Pillar of Autumn, in orbit around Epsilon Eridani system, Reach military complex. Captain Keyes tapped the thrusters of the shuttle pod, Coda. The tiny craft rolled, and the Pillar of Autumn came into view. Normally, captains did not ferry themselves around the space docks of Reach, but Keyes had insisted. All unauthorized personnel were restricted to a narrow flight path around the Pillar of Autumn, and he wanted to take a careful look around the outside of this ship before he took command. From this distance, the Pillar of Autumn could have been mistaken for a Marathon-class carrier. As the shuttle pod moved closer, however, details appeared that betrayed the ship's age. The Pillar of Autumn's hull had several larger dents and scratches. Her engine baffles were blackened. What had he gotten himself into by signing up for Dr. Halsey's mission? He moved within 100 meters and circled to starboard. The shuttle bay on this side was sealed off. Red and yellow hazard warnings had been painted on metal plates that had been hastily welded over her entrance. He closed to 10 meters and saw the plates were not a solid sheet of metal. He could see armored ports, heavily reinforced, almost solid titanium A. Honeycombed throughout this section were the round covers of Archer missile pods. Captain Keyes counted, 30 pods across, 10 down. Each pod held dozens of missiles. The Pillar of Autumn had a secret arsenal to rival any real cruiser in the fleet. Captain Keyes drifted toward the stern and noticed concealed and recessed 50mm autocannons for defense against single ships. Underneath were bumps, part of the linear accelerator system for the ship's lone MAC gun. It looked too small to be truly effective, but he would reserve judgment. Perhaps, like the rest of the Pillar of Autumn, the weapon was more than it appeared to be. He certainly hoped so. Captain Keyes returned to the port side and drifted gently into the shuttle bay. He took note of 3 Longsword single ships and 3 Pelican dropships in the bay. One of the Pelicans had double the normal armor plating and what looked like grappling attachments. A serrated titanium ram decorated the dropship's prow. He touched down on an automated landing platform and locked the controls down. A moment later, the shuttle descended below decks and was cycled through the airlock. Captain Keyes gathered his duffel bag and stepped onto the flight deck. Lieutenant Hikawa was there to meet him. She saluted. "Welcome aboard, Captain Keyes." He saluted. "What do you think of her, Lieutenant?" Lieutenant Hikawa's dark eyes widened. "You're not going to believe this ship, sir." Her normally serious face broke with a smile. "They've turned it into something special. I saw what they did to my starboard shuttle bay," Captain Keyes remarked sourly. "That's just the start," she said. "I can give you a full tour." "Please," Captain Keyes said. He paused at an intercom. "Just one thing first, Lieutenant." He keyed the intercom. "Ensign Lovell, plot a course to the system's edge and move the Pillar of Autumn on an accelerating vector. We will jump to slipstream space as soon as we get there." "Sir," Lovell replied, "our engines are still in shakedown mode." "Cortana?" Captain Keyes asked. "Can we have power to move the ship? I'd like to get underway." "The engine's final shakedown is in theta cycle," Cortana replied, "operating well within normal parameters, diverting 30% power to engines." "Aye, sir." "And the other system status?" Captain Keyes asked. "Weapon system check initiated. Navigational nodes functioning. Continuing system-wide shakedown and triple checks, Captain." "Very good," he said. "Apprise me if there are any anomalies." "Aye, Captain," she replied. "We finally have an AI," he remarked to Hikawa. "We've got more than that, sir," Hikawa replied. "Cortana is running the shakedown and supervising Dr. Halsey's modifications to the ship. We have a backup AI to handle point defense." "Really?" Keyes was surprised. Getting a single AI was tough enough these days. Getting 2 was unprecedented. "Yes, sir. I'll see to the initialization of our AI as soon as Cortana is through running her diagnostics." Captain Keyes had met Cortana, briefly, in Dr. Halsey's office. Although every AI he had met was brilliant, Cortana seemed exceptionally qualified. Captain Keyes had posed several navigational problems and she had figured out all the solutions and had come up with a few options he had not considered. She was somewhat high-spirited, but that was not necessarily a bad thing. Lieutenant Hikawa led him into the elevator and punched the button for D-Deck. "At first," Hikawa said, "I was concerned with all the ordnance on board. One penetrating shot, and we could explode like a string of firecrackers. But this ship doesn't have much empty space. It's full of braces, honeycomb titanium A, and hydraulic reinforcements that can be activated in an emergency. She can take a tremendous beating, sir." "Let's hope we don't have to test that," Captain Keyes said. He checked that his pipe was in his pocket. "Yes, sir." Their elevator passed through the rotating section of the ship, and Captain Keyes felt his weight ease and a flutter of vertigo. He grabbed hold of the rails. The doors opened, and they entered the cavernous engine room. The ceiling was 4 stories high, making this the largest compartment in the ship. Catwalks and platforms ringed the hexagonal chamber. "Here's the new reactor, sir," Hikawa said. The device perched within a lattice of non-ferric ceramic and leaded crystal. The main reactor ring was nestled in the center of what appeared to be 2 smaller reactor rings. Technicians floated nearby, taking readings and monitoring the output displays on the walls. "I'm not familiar with this design, Lieutenant." "The latest reactor technology. The Pillar of Autumn is the first ship to get it. The two smaller fusion reactors come online to supercharge the main reactor. Their overlapping magnetic